What's up guys, my name is Ace, and one of the more common questions I've been seeing pop up when it comes to Warzone lately is what is the best long-range assault rifle? I think at this point most people are aware at just how good the FFAR, the Groza, the AMAX, as well as the AS-Val are at close to mid-range. However, it seems like a lot of stuff is still up in the air when it comes to what is the best long-range assault rifle. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. I'm going to be comparing the top 6 that I pulled out here based on their stats, and putting them side by side to see which one is best. And let's just hop right into it with damage. So the 6 assault rifles I pulled out here are the Krig 6 and QBZ-83 from Cold War, and then from Modern Warfare we've got the Kilo, the M4, the Grau, and the M13. And when it comes to damage, pretty much all of these are really comparable with just a couple exceptions here. The first exception is the Krig 6 deals a little bit more damage than everything else, but not by enough to change the number of shots to kill in most situations. As you can see here, for instance, if the enemy has 2 armor plates equipped, then yes, the Krig will actually take 1 less shot to kill compared to most of the other guns on this list, but in every other situation, it's going to be exactly the same. The second exception here is the Kilo 141 has a 3rd damage drop-off range, and we're going to be looking at this a little bit later on, but that is something that's very important to point out because these are designed for really long ranges, and that definitely hampers its ability at extremely long ranges. And then finally, the third exception here is the M13. This one just deals less damage than all the others. However, it has a very noticeably higher fire rate, and therefore it does sort of make up for the fact that it takes you an extra shot or 2 to get a kill on somebody. So overall, when looking at damage, all of these are going to be pretty much exactly the same, at least in practical terms in most situations, aside from the M13. But now let's move into our rate of fire. This is where the M13 really shines. It's got a really fast fire rate compared to the others. And then you can see the Krig 6 is the slowest firing out of all of these guns, which makes sense because it does deal the most damage as well. And when we end up looking at the DPS value, or damage per second value, keeping in mind this is within the maximum damage range for these guns, you can see that they all fall somewhere in the 300s. The M4 has the highest DPS value, and then on the bottom end, we have the QBZ-83 with the lowest DPS. So putting this all together, let's have a look at our 3-plate time to kill. And the reason I want to look at the 3-plate time to kill is by the time you've got your loadouts in Warzone, usually you're going to be fighting people that have full armor plates. So that's the most important time to kill to be looking at. And first up, I want to look at the time to kill values in the maximum damage range for these guns, which we will be looking at those ranges pretty soon here. And this is actually where I ordered this list. So you can see on the top here, we've got the M4A1. This kills the fastest up close out of all of these guns, followed by the Kilo, then the Grau, then the M13, then the QBZ-83, and then finally the Krig 6. And it's worth noting that there is a pretty big difference in time to kill with the Krig 6 compared to the M4, for instance. The M4 kills very noticeably faster than a Krig 6. Now, since these guns are designed to be used at long range, I also want to look at what happens after the first damage drop-off range here with our time to kill. And you can see all the new values there. Keep in mind, this actually changes up the ordering a little bit. So now the QBZ is actually going to be killing noticeably slower than a Krig 6, which is quite interesting. And you also might notice with the Kilo, I've got 2 values stated there, and that 1001 millisecond value, that is in that 3rd damage drop-off range that the Kilo has, which if you're stacking with the right attachments on the Kilo, that damage drop-off point is happening at 86 meters. So I would still say most of your gunfights would be within 86 meters. However, if you are challenging somebody beyond 86 meters, which is definitely possible with these guns, your time to kill potential isn't very good with the Kilo at that point. And I guess this is the perfect time to dive into our range values. Keep in mind with this, I did want to compare these ranges with the proper attachments on these guns. So you're going to have the monolithic suppressor or agency suppressor or equivalent, combined with the best barrel that you can use for each one of these guns for Warzone. And don't worry, after this comparison, I'm actually going to go through and show you guys what I consider to be the best attachment combination for each one of these guns. But yeah, I've got them ordered here. You can see the M13 actually has the best range potential, even though it is going to take you more shots to kill. But then that's followed by the Grau and the Kilo, and keep in mind with the Kilo, there is that 86 meter drop-off point as well, which is just way off this graph. It's so far away that it would skew everything else on the graph if I zoomed out, so I just left it out of there. It is something you have to be aware of, though. Then we've got the M4, followed by the Krig 6, and then finally the QBZ-83. Even with the good barrel and everything, it's only got a 31 meter range, which is kind of pathetic, but that's where it sits. And with that, I did want to move on to an extremely important stat for long-range assault rifles in Warzone. This is bullet velocity. If you don't have a really fast bullet velocity, then your ability to hit moving targets at long range is severely diminished, and that's something we want to be able to do with these guns, so it's a very important stat. However, when we compare all of them when they're stacked with the best attachments, they're all pretty much the same. They're all around 1250 to 1300 meters per second, which in a practical situation, you're not really going to be able to feel the difference between 1250 and 1300. So effectively speaking, I just treat all of these exactly the same when it comes to their bullet velocity. And finally, with this comparison, I'm going to move into what I consider to be most important out of all of these stats that I've shared, since everything is so similar already, and this is our recoil. All of our stats like damage and time to kill and stuff, they don't really matter if we can't effectively hit our shots. And since we're dealing with people at really long ranges, our ability to control our recoil with these guns is extremely important when it comes to determining the effectiveness of these guns. So here's our comparison, and once again, keep in mind this is stacked with all of the best attachments I'm going to be sharing in a second here. And when it comes to recoil, there's always some subjectivity here. Like for me, for instance, I really don't like recoil patterns that lean to the left, like the Kilo, for instance. Even though the magnitude of that recoil is very low, it's a super accurate gun, I don't like the feel of the Kilo. So for me, I don't like it, but for you, you might love it. And this is why I can't really give a super definitive answer here when it comes to which one of these has the best recoil pattern. I personally find the M13 and the M4A1 are the easiest to control for me, even though if you're just looking at the recoil patterns, it might not look like that should be the case. And instead, it looks like the Krig 6 and the QBZ are better. But that's just what works for me, and therefore you do have to make this decision for yourself, and just use these recoil patterns to sort of get you on the right path so you can test some stuff out for yourself and see what feels best in your hands. And with that, that pretty much covers it for the comparison of these guns. Now I want to go through and share what I consider to be the best attachment combinations to use in Warzone, assuming you're going to be pairing these with a close range gun to help you clear out rooms. And I'm actually going to go through this list in reverse order. I'm going to start with the gun that I feel is the worst out of all of these for a long-range assault rifle, and then work my way up to what I consider to be the best. Which, I've got to say right now, a lot of these are so similar that it is still going to be up in the air. Out of all of these guns, the best one for me might not end up being the best one for you, but now you guys have the stats and everything, so you can make that decision for yourself. So hopping right into it, out of all these guns, my least favorite is the QBZ-83. And with this, the ideal setup for a long-range assault rifle in Warzone is going to be the Agency Suppressor and the Ranger Barrel, the Bruiser Grip, and the Salvo 60-round Fast Mag. At least at this point, this is sort of generally considered to be the best setup for at least a longer range setup for a Cold War assault rifle in Warzone. And yeah, I'm not saying this gun is bad or unusable or anything, I just don't really like using it in Warzone all that much. And that's why it is at the bottom of my list, but it might not be the bottom of your list. After that, you might be surprised to see the Kilo 141. Like I said earlier, I'm just not a fan of that left-leaning recoil, and I never have been. Even when the Kilo was the meta gun to be using, I didn't use it all that often. But with this, the ideal setup's going to be the Monolithic Suppressor, the Prowler Barrel, the Tac Laser, the VLK 3X Optic, and the 60-round magazine. And we are going to see a really similar trend repeat itself with all these attachments with all of the Modern Warfare guns. But yeah, that's my Kilo setup, but now let's move on to the next one, which is actually the Krig 6. Now, I've been seeing a decent amount of talk about the Krig 6 possibly being like the new meta long-range assault rifle. I personally think it's being overhyped a little bit. I don't think it's a bad gun. I think it's great for long range. It's very accurate, quite easy to control, but I do feel its fire rate holds it back. It's a very unforgiving gun compared to something like an M13 or an M4 if you happen to be missing a few shots. Additionally, we don't have the greatest range potential out of this with the barrels that we're going to be using if we want to maximize our bullet velocity, which we definitely want to do. So that's why, for me at least, it does fall a little bit lower on my list. I still encourage you guys to give it a shot. You might fall in love with it and it might be like your new favorite long-range gun. But for me, it just doesn't live up to the hype. Next up on my list, here's the Grau setup that I use, which is the exact same attachment combination as the Kilo, and it'll be the same on the M4 and the M13 as well. But basically with this gun, this used to be the meta gun that everybody was using, and then the Bruin sort of took over the meta, and then after the Bruin was nerfed, it seemed like people just didn't go back to the Grau. They kind of forgot about it and just moved on to the Kilo at that point, when the Grau has just always been good this whole time. And I'm now seeing some people returning to it, and for good reason. It's an excellent long-range assault rifle. Moving on to number 2 on my list, this is the M13. There's something about the M13 that's just always worked really well for me. I love using the M13. I think it's just because its fire rate is so fast that it's really forgiving. If you happen to miss a few bullets here or there, which is sort of bound to happen at really long ranges, it's not that big of a deal with the M13 because your next shot is coming out immediately. So yeah, if I am going to be using the M13 combined with an SMG for clearing rooms, then this is how I'm going to kit out my M13. And finally, this leaves us with the last gun on my list, and what I personally consider to be the best long-range assault rifle right now. This is the M4A1. I don't know what it is about this gun, but this is another one of those guns where I feel like early on in Warzone's life, the M4 was on top. Like, everybody was using the M4, and then the Grau as well alongside that. And for whatever reason, it seems like people have just faded away from it, and you don't hear people talking about it all that much. Yet, I do consider it to be the best overall on this list of guns. Not only does it have the best time to kill potential, it also has a very forgiving fire rate, pretty solid range values, and the recoil, at least for me, is super easy to control. So yeah, it is kind of hard to call this gun underrated because I think most people still understand that it's a very solid gun, but I'm just not seeing a ton of people use it anymore, and I'm a little bit surprised by that. And with that, that's going to wrap it up for today's video on what I consider to be the best long-range assault rifles in Warzone's current state. Of course, like I mentioned, this is subjective to some extent, and therefore I want to hear from you guys in the comments below as well. Which of these 6 assault rifles do you consider to be the best for a long-range build? If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.